Welcome to the Law News Docket, the part of the show where we review law-related stories in the news and how they affect us. A recent study from Alliance Life Insurance shows that elder financial abuse remains an underreported and misunderstood issue, and one that will worsen as America's population ages and life expectancy rises.
The study of more than 2,000 Americans, both potential victims 65 and older, and other adults between the age of 40 and 64, found that misconceptions persist about the most likely sources of abuse and the financial impact that abuse has on its victims, which is very underreported, is often fairly significant.
While the number of the elders in the study who have said they've suffered financial abuse is relatively small at only 5%, this number likely is an underestimate because some seniors might not self-identify with this type of abuse or may not report this type of abuse. Given that the senior population is expected to surpass 54 million people by the year 2020, the Alliance Life Study suggests that millions of American seniors could experience this financial abuse. Nearly 1 in 5 adults aged 40 to 64 reported that they have an older friend or family member who's been a victim in the past. Of this percent, or of this amount of people, more than half said the victims did not report the financial abuse.
You know, the study also highlights a lack of awareness about the sources of elder financial abuse. When asked where the biggest threats actually come from, the majority of both elders and family friends of potential victims rated telemarketing contact as the most likely source of abuse, followed by internet scams and U.S. mail solicitation. Of those elders who reported experiencing financial abuse, the incident was more likely to have been perpetrated by a family member, a friend, or a caregiver than by a stranger. This is consistent with the previous studies suggesting that elder financial abuse is commonly committed by people familiar with the victim.
Joining us today is our very special guest, attorney Leanne Montgomery. Leanne, tell us a little bit about your background in elder law.
Well, Mike, I've been a practicing attorney for about 14 years, and in the last several years, I've focused my estate planning practice on elder law issues. So I work with elderly individuals and their families in planning not only preserving their assets, but how they're going to meet their long-term care needs.
Now, Leanne, being in the elder law area, have you seen this type of financial abuse in your practice?
Daryl, unfortunately, I have seen this kind of abuse. Often, sometimes the elder and sometimes family members will come to me and say that their parent has misplaced a significant amount of money and they just can't think what they've done with it. They're getting a lot of mail and they're for solicitations, and they're responding to that mail and writing a lot of checks to a lot of organizations that are questionable at best. They'll also certainly fall victim to scams where somebody comes to the door or offering sidewalk repair or roof repair or driveway repair and wanting to be paid up front. But I think, as you talked about a little bit earlier, the Lion study also shows that a very large percentage of elder financial abuse, probably up to 90% of it, because a lot of it is unreported, is actually at the hands of family members or somebody close to the elderly individual. And this might occur for a lot of reasons. It could be that the individual is ill or maybe suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's and just is not aware of it. And sometimes the elder may be aware of it or suspect it, but that individual that is the abuser might actually also be their caregiver. And they're feeling the threat of being sent to the nursing home, which still has negative connotations in a lot of people's minds.
I think you potentially could see that when you have individuals that are close, from just taking advantage of the situation by taking advantage of maybe a power of attorney or a joint bank account, all the way up to just blatant theft, taking people's ATM cards and things like that. Is that something that you've had to deal with?
something I very often have had to deal with. I think that most common scenario is what you mentioned, Mike, is that a trusting parent has named a child on a durable power of attorney document and said, I give you power to take care of things for me, but then that individual has actually used the money for their own benefit rather than their parent or whoever's entrusted them to their care.
One thing I was going to ask you about with the power of attorney, Leanne, is the fact that when that individual signs that power of attorney, I would assume that you have to make sure that the person that is signing that power of attorney is mentally capable of signing it?
Absolutely. And as elder law attorneys, we are certainly trained to make some assessment as to competency. Of course, we're not doctors, and there have been occasionally times in my practice where I've asked the individual to obtain a statement of competency from their physician so that I could be absolutely sure. The other thing that I'm very careful about in my practice is I do meet with families and their kids, but letting them know who the client is, who's in the driver's seat, who's making the decisions. It's mom, it's dad, or aunt or uncle. It's not them. And I would always, at some time during the consultation, have the kids go out of the room so that I can talk to that individual on their own, and you would be surprised. Usually it's all, everybody's in agreement, but occasionally the kid will leave the room and then I'll hear, well, really, that's not quite my feeling about it.
How do you set up something to help create at least some level of oversight in that situation where you're trying to keep an eye on people that are very close to the elderly?
Well, the first thing, to Daryl's question about a durable power of attorney, is I always say no matter who you name here, you better trust them. They have certainly fiduciary responsibilities, and Ohio law addresses that, but often when that money's gone, it's too late. So I'll have situations where another sibling might come to me and say, I think my brother or sister or niece or whoever is abusing their power here. And that's a time I want to first of all meet with the elderly individual and see what they're thinking. But I would also often let them know, and I think it's important for our viewers to know, that Ohio law provides that every county provide adult protective services. And one of the big functions of adult protective services, which runs out of the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, is that they take reports of abuse, and not only do they take them, but they are required to investigate them. And when they are conducting their investigation, they as well will go and meet with the elderly individual. I think that's really helpful at times when a family member's a little uncomfortable with perhaps making an accusation, say, to another family member, that they can get an independent party involved.
Great. Well, thank you very much for commenting on that. I think it is an attorney talking to various people. You also have to be aware of scams by strangers, scams by professionals when you start to get into things like predatory lending, reverse mortgages, things that may not be a great idea. So it's always something the family wants to keep an eye on. But feel free to look for more information and bring up points that you do agree or do not agree on during the conversation on our Facebook page. So we thank you very much for being here today.